In this age of gender confusion, it's difficult to find advice you can trust to help protect your child from those who would seek to unduly influence them, setting them up to be manipulated and exploited. On Unmasking the Trans Movement, we discuss, educate, and deliver the info parents want and need to help their children, grandchildren, and even themselves.
Welcome to Unmasking the Trans Movement. Now, here's your host, Brad Wilder.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. We are live on this Sunday of a long weekend here in Canada. Down in the States, their weekend, a long weekend, is right around the corner as they get all set for, obviously, their big celebration July 4th. It's going to be a good one down there, and we're going to have a great one here in Canada as we again celebrate both of our countries here in North America. And even though our governments seem to be wanting us no longer to be Canada or the USA, we're definitely holding on and still maintaining our patriotism, and Canadians won't take no for an answer on that, and neither will Americans as they head into, obviously, their big vote coming up a little later. November the 5th will be the big day, and you probably watched the debate the other night. We'll probably touch on that topic tonight. There's a lot to get to. Dr. Ann Gillies is here, our co-host, as well as John Euler. They're going to discuss Dr. Ann's brand new book that came out, and the new book also that she's working on as she heads into 2024 with a brand new project as well. There's lots to come right here on Unmasking the Trans Movement, and it all happens right after this. Citizens and librarians alike have expectations for libraries, and well-run ones can be amazing for everyone. School libraries are often essential to educating children, and as such, special rules apply for the well-being of children in every corner of the world. The World Library Association aims to counter the woke American Library Association's efforts to indoctrinate and sexualize children and hide content from parents and grandparents. The World Library Association provides decades of experience with libraries, and we want to help educate and apply that experience to improve your libraries, whether you're citizens, teachers, librarians, and even trustees. Our common sense model policies comply with community standards, enabling libraries to become truly useful for everyone in the community, and empowering librarians to ensure they work in a safe work environment. The World Library Association. Have questions? We're always open to talk about your libraries, new projects, creative opportunities, and how we can help you. The World Library Association. See us online at worldlibraryassociation.org. Welcome back. Well, tonight we are going to discuss a variety of topics. John Euler is with us, as well as Dr. Ann Gillies. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. Thank you very much for both of you for being here. We've got lots to get to. And John, we had a great show last Sunday night. We got to discuss a lot of great topics, and tonight we're going to do the exact same thing. The debate that went on in the U.S., we'll start with that. That was quite the show the other night with Trump and Biden. John, what's your take on that situation?
Well, I tend to be subject matter driven. There's a number of things that concern me, and for purposes of our meeting tonight, our discussion, you look at policies that are being pushed, and things were very different under Trump. Again, we're not necessarily going to focus on politics, but policies. Policies matter. Title IX here in the U.S., that is the government protection, or was the protection of women, giving them their own spaces, really set the stage for women's only sports, meaning women's sports.
Right.
Who in their right mind would undermine that? Well, unfortunately, we have one presidential candidate that has seen fit to push for allowing sexually deviant men into women's sports so that they can access the locker rooms. One presidential candidate and party has pushed to have sexually deviant men go into prisons to become cellies with women inmates, meaning they're going to rape these women, these sexually deviant men, because it's quote unquote trans inmates, the men actually want to stay in male prisons because that's the safest for them and it's entertaining for them too. and virtually all of them are busted for prostitution. So trust me, I had enough on my caseload when I was on psych staff. Plus, there's one political party that has made a significant plank of sexualizing kids through schools, through this deviant material, and ensuring that kids get onto the moving sidewalk of the trans movement where they guaranteed will be sterilized and dumped out onto a surgeon's gurney, making them profitable for medical psychopaths. Quite frankly, there's no other way to put it, and sexual psychopaths. And there's nobody better to talk about this, because she's written in a lot of different books that she's written about, is
Citizens and librarians alike.
Ann Gillies. And thank you for coming back on.
Well, I'm glad to be here, John. And we've talked lots about this in other episodes, but I don't think parents can hear it enough, because we need to help them tell their children their truth, right? The actual biological truth about male and female that we took for granted growing up. I mean, who would have thought we'd be here? And so, we're in a very, very dark time, but I think there's hope. I think people are starting to awaken, and I think more and more in the US and Canada, parents are going, what's going on with our schools? What's going on with our children? What is going on politically? And like you said, in policies in the US and in Canada too. I mean, it's just, we just keep getting whacked, and so we just really want to stand strong against some of that stuff. So I'm really happy to be here.
We have to stay up on top of a variety of projects, in a sense, or topics, because ultimately this is coming at us from so many different directions, and it starts politically, and whether it's the trans movement or the mandates that they put on us for 2 years, it's all tied together, right? So again, our viewers might not understand that whole aspect of things, but the trans movement falls right in line with their deviant political stance on a lot of different topics. From Roe v. Wade to, the other many, many, many things that are going to divide both the Democrats and the Republicans. I believe that, Trump won the debate the other night and won the day at the end of it all. Biden looked like a bumbling, stumbling fool, which, for his age, I just shake my head and go, that's elderly, maltreatment, in my opinion. It's a sad thing to see. He should be in a home, being taken care of, living out his last days, not being paraded around to be a world leader and have his hand on a nuclear button by any stretch. But okay, the politics is over. I got to get a little bit of that in there, because it does tie together with the trans movement. And while John might not be willing to say the Democratic Party, I will. I'll make sure to point out that that's the Democrats, and up here in Canada it's called the Liberals, or the NDP, which is the New Democratic Party. And they're all tied together. They're in cahoots, and, we've got to do our due diligence as patriots to make sure that at the end of the day we make some big voting changes as you get closer to your elections in the U.S., and the same thing for us as we move forward in 2025. And everybody says it, Justin's got to go. So let's finish up with the political side of things there. We've got some guests to say hello to. Thank you very much, everybody, for stopping in tonight and joining us live on Unmasking the Trans Movement. You're welcome to join us in the chat. We have that wide open. Pretty Weird Duck is here. Welcome, Pretty Weird Duck. All of your comments are being watched and reviewed tonight. We'll get your questions out to Dr. Ann or John throughout the course of the evening. So please join us and fill in the chat, and let's get this show started. John, Dr. Ann has a book that you want to discuss tonight. Why don't we jump right in with that, because I know that it's got some pretty important topics within that book that, again, are discussing the trans movement and what's happening. And it's done in a very creative way. That's the one thing we can say about Dr. Ann, is she's always creative.
That's right, and it's straightforward and fact-filled, a lot of details. And Brad, it was very appropriate for you to bring up about political parties. Because we really encourage people to think deeply about the issues because elections matter. And why? Because they implement policies. There's going to be a push toward legislation. Here in the US, again, Title IX that
That's
protected
right.
women's sports has been done away with. The gates have been open, talking about the floodgates, and that was one of your books. The floodgates have been open to send very dangerously deviant men into women's prisons. These are our daughters. These are somebody's mother that are going to be raped in prison, 100% guaranteed.
And so that's where Roe v. Wade ties in too, because that's another part of all of this. It's like bam, 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 right?
That's right. And as far as Roe v. Wade, what comes to mind is Planned Parenthood. And unless people think deeply about it, unless certain women on the political spectrum, if they don't think deeply about this, if abortion is so important, then unfortunately you have a choice. You either stick with the party of abortion, but guess what you also get? The party of sexually deviant men. And that's why Planned Parenthood has left women in the dust. And guess who they're backing? The sexually deviant men.
Well, and Planned Parenthood also now is transitioning young people. They're providing the hormone therapy. They're encouraging these young people, especially young girls, and there's no follow-up. There's no medical follow-up. No doctor is supervising this along the way. Like, it's very dangerous. And like everything with Planned Parenthood. But the whole process is all about the destruction of the family. That's what it all comes down to. The whole political sphere, everything the policies that are being brought forward, both in Canada, the US, and in Europe, many of them, not all, there's some good stuff coming too, but so much over the last 50, 60 years has all been about slowly seeing the family disappear. The nuclear family, the family that becomes the foundation for healthy development of children. So, yeah, there is a huge, huge agenda that is afoot, and it has been for a long time. And people,
and let's even talk about it because it's more radical. Although California now is the equivalent of Canada, what's going on? So you just talked about it's undermining family values. It's undermining parental authority. Speak to how serious this is. If parents do not awaken, they're going to find themselves. There was a father that was jailed in Canada for not going along with this transition. The child was being groomed in schools as well as by another parent. And lo and behold, he said, wait, whoa, I'm not going along with this. My daughter is my daughter. And before you know it, not only is the child yanked from the home, but he's put in prison. Talk to people about how serious this is, because while we're sleeping at night, these folks are very serious. They're hell-bent in making sure they accomplish the end goal. So talk to parents how they really need to take this seriously, because if we don't step up, which is happening little by little, but votes matter. So who we elect really matters. We need to find out who are we voting for, especially on the protection of women and children. So talk to parents, give them a wake-up call what's happening in Canada as well as in California and other states in the U.S.
Well, you're right. And I think we do need to wake up, because children, and that is a very, very sad case, because the daughter was not demanding the father, her father, better say the right, well, it is her father, use the right pronouns. It was more the mother, and this was divorce situation that was going on. But what you see here is families divided. We're right in that whole thing, that the division of the family. And so the upset that causes. But then what happens is with these cases, there's a whole other element that comes in, and that is the LGBTQ, that is the trans part of it, that is so aggressively trying, I would say, to persecute this poor man for simply saying, this is my little girl, this is my daughter, I don't agree. And you see, parents in Canada cannot disagree with what their children now decide to do.
Which is
You
perfect
know,
for a predator. That's all a predator needs.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And if your child at 10 years old, uh, got some cigarettes from a friend because they couldn't buy them, they can't get them in Canada till they're 19. You have to have, but if they brought some cigarettes home and said, "Mom, I'm starting to smoke today," and the parents, what parent in their right mind would say, "Oh, great, good idea, let's start this." And so they don't do that. We don't give them driver's license. They can't buy alcohol. But if they come home and say, "I think I'm born in the wrong body," and you as a parent say, "I don't think so. You're my child. I know what sex you are. Let's not talk about all these genders, but what sex you are." Um, that is a crime in Canada. That is a crime. You cannot literally tell the child that they are not what they think they are, their mind. And it's really interesting because, and I have this actually. Let me read this for you very quickly, because this is kind of one of the things that I put right in the beginning. The British Columbia Teachers Union. So British Columbia is on the West Coast. The Teachers Federation Handbook
And by
says
the way,
this.
is this from your book?
Yes, yes.
Okay, let me let me show people the title of it. Let me do this here.
I love the artwork on this book.
There we go. So that people can see. Here is the cover of Dr. Ann Gillies' book, The Ultimate Deception, The Truth of Gender Affirming Care, and that's the back cover of it. So beautiful artwork, but notice the snake, right? This is the ultimate deception. So Ann, I wanted to share that. So you're going to quote now from your book. I urge everybody to get this. It's available online. Amazon has it, and it will help equip them to combat, to be able to speak to school boards, to be able to speak to others that are getting sucked into this.
Yes, lots of research there, but it's readable. So the BC Teachers Federation Handbook states that gender is a product of the mind. When I read that, I went, "Whoa, well, they got that right." It is. See,
it's fiction.
It's not a biological reality. It's a product of the mind. But then they go on and say being transgender or gender nonconforming is normal and healthy. Well, John, you and I know, like, come on.
Wow.
Every product of the mind is not normal and healthy. Think of teenagers. Oh my goodness. There's so much stuff that goes through their minds. Adults, we have all kinds of stupid thoughts,
I work with justice involved men. Things that go through their mind are not healthy and normal.
That's right. But so here the in one breath, the Teachers Federation states truth, that it is a product of the mind. It is a state of mind. It is not a biological reality. But then, on the other hand, they say, but it's normal and healthy, which is absolute fallacy. And that's the whole problem. This whole dysphoria, this feeling of being unhappy or uneasy. So gender dysphoria is simply, feeling unhappy or uneasy with their biological sex, their birth sex. Well, most teenagers that you and I know, I think every teenager has some kind of dysphoria, unease, or unhappiness. There's any given day when my kids were in their teens, I mean, you never know what was coming in the door or who was coming in. Are we happy? Are we not? Is this a combat moment? Because they go through so many different phases and emotions. And yet here we have this trendy thing called transgender that isn't even a medical term. It's a political term, and it has taken over. And so we have now what we're seeing, John, and you described it really well, is that we're seeing the fallout of all of that after the last 10, 15 years. And it's deadly. It's really, really starting to hit home with so many families. And the parents are just left devastated, traumatized, and the children are are radically indoctrinated to the point where they're just so hostile to their own parents, and parents basically know nothing. And our education system unfortunately has promoted that parents really don't know what they're talking about. And you, as a child, you know yourself best, which no, your parent knows you best. I mean, you know who you think you might be, but you aren't even, as a young adult, their brains aren't even finished formulating, maturing until they're 25. So we need parents. Children need parents to help set boundaries and to help them navigate through those early years. And the schools are pretty much destroying those relationships with parents.
They're really interfering, aren't they?
Oh, horribly, horribly. And that's part of this whole SOGI. Well, you talked about that right at the first, Brad. We've
Yeah.
talked about that before. The sex education and gender identity projects right across Canada and across Europe from WPATH. And it's the age of even sexual expression and sexual activity is pretty much taken out of the documents now. I don't think there is any age limit, which is all part. Haha, there you go.
A new study, I have to admit, I haven't read it. This was just sent to me. Partners for Ethical Care, Alex Aron
Okay.
group, and a number of good folks are a part of this. So there's a new study. Trans-identified adults have double the prevalence of cirrhosis. Think about body keeps the score. So a lot of cirrhosis is due to stress, quite frankly. They show higher rates of alcohol and viral-related cirrhosis, along with higher rates of anxiety and depression. The truth is the only thing that's going to set someone free. If you sell someone, especially a troubled teen, you sell them a lie and they buy it, well, it's not going to produce anything as far as long-term positive results. You will be selling them short-term relief, which is a placebo, quite frankly, and you mask that, but then the trans stuff, and as we will talk about, right, this gender affirming care, what does that come down to? Sterilization and amputation. You do not help self-esteem by chopping off body parts. You will
Well,
now just compound it.
that is so true. So I'm going to read to you the back cover of my book because
Please,
I think this is really pertinent to what you're discussing right there. So I'm just going to read this quickly. I put a medical symbol on the back cover, and I said, this symbol, medical symbol, has always seemed a mystery to me, from the Hermes myth to the suggestion of Moses holding up his staff in the wilderness. The dual snakes on the cross are suggestive of harmony in healing. And this has become the universal symbol of healing art of medicine, which is so important. But what our children are now encountering in the realm of medical intervention is not about healing or health. Rather, I like gender affirmation to the snake in the grass, waiting to strike without provocation. Although in nature, that's rarely the case, the human analogy is strong. Taking this analogy further, I believe there are many snakes in the grass, and this is exactly what you're talking about. They are waiting. They are no longer hiding, but rather in plain sight, promoting a false ideology intended to poison the young. As venom of gender ideological thought expounded in our education system, our medical and psychological associations, and political spheres flows through the bloodstream of this generation, its toxicity, I can't speak. Its toxicity grows, affecting minds and hearts. And it is so toxic. It's so toxic. The poison of gender affirming care sets children's minds on things that ought not to be. They should never have to think about these things. And so when you're talking about mental health and anxiety, we've talked about this before, that we are creating the greatest mental health crisis. We are creating it in our education system with our youngest of children because we are confusing them about the very basic, the very core of their actual identity as male and female. And so what we're getting, is these toxins. They're toxic. And what you said is truth. The only antidote for venomous snake bites,
Right.
there's an antidote. And for toxins such as the mind control stuff that's going on, is only truth. That's the only antidote that we can give them, and we have to give them truth.
Well, Anne, let's show a previous clip that you and I had Dr. Ann Cretella on, your good friend, and
Michelle.
Dr. Michelle Cretella. Okay, and if people want to watch this, it's certainly found on our channel, unmaskingthetransmovement.com. We've just asked Dr. Cretella about this issue of kids that are being, quote unquote, affirmed and the dangers of that. And, how is it that this has happened and the dangers of overlooking a primary issue, which is trauma?
Those are all excellent points. And in fact, I'll send you this reference, after our program, so you can post it below. There is an American study, well, two recent studies, one from 2018 and one from 2021, looking at thousands of young people who do identify as trans. And each of those studies demonstrated before these children presented with any cross-sex behaviors
Well, I'm sorry, hold on. I'm being told by Brad, you can't hear this? Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, I think we can hear it, John, but I really think it's coming out of your speakers and not being directed through the program.
I think you're right. Sorry about the technology. Okay, I'll solve that issue. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. I know you got to just click a button.
Sorry, everyone. It's a very good video. Let me do this. This is all me. Okay, share, and then I have to click this button. So we're going to get back to the video. Dr. Cretella has just been talking about some studies that are showing that kids, in essence, the real issue is not what they're being told. So let's see if we'll go back just for a moment here. Brad, tell me if you all can hear this. Speak to that as a physician.
Those are all excellent points. And in fact, I'll send you this reference, after our program, so you can post it below. There is an American study, well, two recent studies, one from 2018 and one from 2021, looking at thousands of young people who do identify as trans. And each of those studies demonstrated before these children presented with any cross-sex behaviors or any sign of feeling like the opposite sex, before any of that, 98% of them had a history of prior mental illness, including self-harm, suicidal ideation, and trauma. And I want to say, on average, the children had, on average, 5 traumas each, many of them occurring within the family. And these traumas included, sexual, physical, verbal, the gamut. But trauma is, if we were looking at it honestly, if we had researchers and doctors doing this honestly, unencumbered by politics and profit, we would have, the media would be blaring about what a huge risk factor trauma is, adverse childhood events, ACEs.
Oh, sorry. Anne, you and I are both trauma therapists. You're certified in complex trauma. This is our concern. Talk to us about what Dr. Cretella just said, and help parents understand, those that are going to be watching this, that the issue of trauma is left out of the equation. And if a therapist were to begin to inquire, the label of conversion therapy is given, and they risk losing their license, if not, depending upon the country, actually being jailed.
That's right. So, yeah, we can't in Canada for sure, and certainly in many of the states that have are really pushing. I mean, conversion therapy is basically it's a wrong word, but any kind of therapy to help individuals who need to have the underlying causes looked at. We can't do that because the rhetoric, the the script is there's nothing wrong with these children. This is perfectly healthy and normal. And it is not. And what we have are these highly traumatized, like Michelle said, 98%. That's ridiculous that we are ignoring these children. And one of the things that just come out, so this is just in June 14th, actually. I'll grab this. I was going to show this later, but I think I'll do this right now because I think it's helpful. It's right in the middle. Now, oops, I didn't do that right. Just a moment. I have to share my
No, we're
screen.
therapists. We're not technical folks.
Well,
But Brad,
yeah,
bless his
I
heart, right?
understand.
Brad tries to work with us here. You guys need to get up on technology.
I know. Well, listen, so I want to share this with those people watching. So doctorsprotectingchildren.org, you can get the whole declaration, and it's very significant. But these are organizations representing over 75,000 physicians and healthcare professionals, so psychologists, psychiatrists, and this was published June 14th. And after what Michelle said, listen to what they have declared. This is a declaration saying no more. Therefore, given the recent research and revelations of the harmful approach advocated by WPATH and its followers in the US, we, the undersigned, call on the medical professional organizations of the United States, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society, the Pediatric Endocrine Society, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry to follow the science and their European professional colleagues and immediately stop the promotion of social affirmation, not just puberty blockers, but social transitioning, and then,
There goes the trans movement right there.
oh yeah, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries for children and adolescents who experience distress over their biological sex. Instead, these organizations should recommend comprehensive evaluations and therapies aimed at identifying and addressing underlying psychological comorbidities and neurodiversity that often predispose to and accompany gender dysphoria. So kudos to Michelle Cretella and many, many. When this was posted, there were 500 signatories. I have no idea how many hundreds have followed.
If we can still sign it, I'm going to go on and sign it.
Yes, you better, John. You better. As a healthcare
Matter of fact,
professional.
we'll put a link. We'll find the link to it, and then any other professional.
Yeah, I think you
There
can.
we go. Doctorsprotectingchildren.org. I'm going to add my name to the 75,000 professionals.
Absolutely. I'll take that off. And what Dr. Cretella and others like her have been advocating and really trying under great persecution to bring this truth forward, because back to where you started, because of political policies that have attempted over and over and over, such as in Canada, Bill C4, all of those, to silence us, to silence professionals from doing their job. And so, but you know what? We haven't been silenced. Brad, sorry.
No, it's okay. I've got a great question. So let's say that this all goes through. This all happens. States take control. Everything starts to detransition. There's kids out there that need help. And
Yes.
that's the part that they've already been coerced, they've been manipulated, they've been extorted. All of the deviant things that call for legal action. These aren't uncriminal words I'm using. They're criminal words. So that being said, is there going to be accountability in that regard? I hope that there would be, but not only the accountability for the people that have caused so much damage, but now we've got to save these kids. And that's the most important part. And I hope that we're going to be able to get through to them, to show them that they've been manipulated, that they've been extorted, that they've been coerced, so that they start using those words to say, wait a minute, you've harmed me, and now I know about it, and I'm not going to sit around and tolerate this any longer. Fair to say?
You're right. I mean, and that's what's happening. There are many starting to speak up, many that have been very, very harmed and have gotten into this whole ideology because of the trauma, because they've been sexually abused, they've been sold as sex slaves, sex trafficking. These children are just so horrifically used and abused. And LGBTQ, I want to say this.
Well, by the way, lawsuits are starting. Significant lawsuits. Chloe Cole against Kaiser Permanente, a very large health system out on the West Coast, which is ironic because they are the ones that produced the ACEs assessment, the Adversive Childhood Experiences assessment. So they understand about childhood trauma, yet they discard that. They don't use it. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. They're going to use the ACEs assessment for every other kid under the sun, except for those that show all the red flag indicators of being sexually abused, and they won't use it on those kids, lest they see that we've got a background of trauma in these kids.
So we need kids out there to hit the brakes then, yeah? Hit the brakes on if they're being coerced into, having these deviant surgeries and cutting off genitals and mutilation like that. They should be taking a break. If they're watching the show, their parents are watching the show, hold off because things are about to change. And as things change, you just might want to reconsider your decisions here moving forward, because we've been saying it for a very long time that there's something very wrong here. But you as a parent who have been coerced, extorted, and manipulated by the system into believing that this is the right thing to do for your child, hey, we recommend now, or I recommend as a broadcaster, that everything that I've learned on this program with both of you, Dr. Ann and John, is saying hit the brakes on this, stop yourselves, take a quick glance, take a breath, get back into, experimenting with the real truth that's out there, finding it again and understanding that you can be a part of that real truth moving forward. And, mental help is just a call away.
Well, and this is the dilemma that both detransitioners and parents find themselves in. Mental health professionals can't help them.
Well, not right now, but that changes in the States. It'll soon change here, and things will be right back on track to where we're getting those individuals the proper help that they need. And yes, let's not forget that it's not just the kids that need the help now. There's been parents who have been manipulated, extorted, and coerced, and they're right on board with this, and they need help too now because their minds have been, messed with.
Well, and they've been sold a bill of goods, and if they don't conform, I hear stories of parents whose siblings, so the aunts and uncles of the children, if the parent suggests that this is wrong, the other family members will challenge the parent and say, you've just got to do this. What are you doing? You go with their pronouns. You treat them nicely. You're not being kind. Well, I'm telling you, telling the truth is kind and it's loving. And what you're saying, Brad, is so important. Parents need to put the brakes on and parent. This is a real dilemma because there's such the whole 20 years of gentle parenting has also contributed to the mess we're in. I go back and think back to Dr. Spock and all those, and you think of the generations and what's happened to our kids, and which is the next book I'm working on. But I think that we need to understand and help parents parent, like say no, put boundaries in, you know.
Now, it's not parental rights anymore. It's parental responsibility.
It is a parental responsibility. And you know what? Your children do have a right. They have some rights. They have the right to be protected. And as a parent, you have the responsibility to protect them. You are the only person that can really stand in the gap for them. And you know, this man in BC chose to stand in the gap for his daughter. He went to jail. He went to jail. But my understanding is that, and this is my understanding, that that relationship with his daughter, you see, she's looking back, you know, and her dad was there for her. And when things turn around for her, and they probably will, I mean, the sad reality is that these kids, I'll just share a stat actually. Dr. Michael Biggs from the US, from UK. John, you've probably heard of him because he kind of blew things up before the CAS report. And so he said that after a year on puberty blockers, here's the reality. 1 year on puberty blockers, children reported greater self-harming, worse. It makes them worse. It makes them crazy. And the girls experienced more behavioral and emotional problems. Well, of course, you're pumping drugs into these kids.
Yeah, we saw that with the shooter down in the school in the States and the church and all of the different things that have happened. There's been a lot that's gone on, right, John?
Well, and here's the other thing.
Fooling around with the endocrine system.
That's right. And so these young girls actually, after a year on puberty blockers, instead of having the gender dysphoria kind of moderate, they're actually worse and they have greater dissatisfaction with their bodies. Greater dissatisfaction. And yet all we hear in the media, mainstream media, is how wonderful this is, and how wonderful these people are, and these trans people just need to be respected. And meanwhile, we're driving them crazy with drugs, these children. And then they go on to cross-sex hormones, which of course are even worse. So we want to see lawsuits come. I hope that there's laws, and I hope it comes to the schools. And actually, maybe this is forward thinking, but I mean, I look at our own area, which is very woke, our Board of Education, and all it's going to take are 2 or 3 lawsuits, and there won't be a Board of Education. And quite honestly, and I know that there's other people across Canada and across the world that are looking at alternate education projects, because I think this education, public education, the way it is going to collapse. It's not sustainable. They're not teaching children. And they're actually...
No, they're indoctrinating children is what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I've been involved in the school system here in Manitoba for the last 3 years since COVID hit. And I've got to tell you that I agree with you, Dr. Ann. There is a deviance that is coming out of these liberal schools, the education system, the sex education that's been transitioned into providing a place to hide for this deviant trans movement. You know, there's some great questions coming in from our wonderful guests online tonight. We should probably quickly, I guess, get to a couple of those great comments or great questions. One of them comes from Pretty Weird Duck. And what's to be done with the parents, especially the mothers who transition their kids because of Munchausen's by proxy? We call it Transhausen by proxy now. But the reality is that, you know, those parents, they need the mental help that their kids are going to receive. And the whole family, in a sense, needs to go for that mental support and the health that's involved there. You need to get back on track as a family. And I'm not a professional by any means, but just common sense says that you've been manipulated and you need to do something about it. And if you're prepared to do something about it, you're going to need to do it as a family. It's affected everybody within the family core. And that's something that they've been trying to destroy, that we've talked about many a time on the program, haven't we, John?
We have, and you know what? Here's a story in case somebody. I just did a simple Google search. So the BC father who broke the ban, he didn't go with it. On publication of his transgender son, actually a female, by the way, XY identity, is sentence reduced. So originally sentenced. Now this was August 2023, originally sentenced to 6 months in jail. And it says this: a father who was handed a 6-month jail sentence for breaking a publication ban that forbade him from publicly identifying his transgender XY child had his sentence shortened. The man identified in the court as only a CD successfully argued that his sentence should be reduced to 45 days, but he was also charged. Oh, he had to make a $30,000 donation to charity.
But he didn't have to do it any longer.
Right. So this is
He should have donated that cash to us because we're here every week.
Right. Yeah.
You were talking about mothers and parents, but women particularly, and you touched, that question really touches on a really important aspect because, and I shared this in the 90s, there was a study, I think I shared this before, and it was on boys who had been diagnosed with gender identity disorder, because that's what it was originally called. And those, the study involved the parents, and they found that 53% of these boys had mothers with borderline personality disorder.
Yes,
so,
Jennings.
Yes, and so when you think of these moms, so and here you go right back even to the womb. This is why people can say, well, I know I was gay. I was born that way, or I was this, or I was that. But the reality is that a mother's fears, a mother's anxiety, if mother is traumatized or beaten, all of those things are felt by the infant. That infant's born, and so the mom sees a little boy and she's not happy. She wanted a girl. And what does mom do? She dresses the boy like a little girl. She won't let the boy play with any boy toys. Like, there's all kinds of things that can happen. This isn't always the trajectory, but many of these children, right from the very earliest ages, their mothers have decided that they didn't want the sex that they were given, the little boy or the little girl, usually it's a boy, that the mothers decide they want to feminize. And so you have those kind of things, and you have now this ideology that so many moms who already struggle with mental health issues go, I can get attention from this. I can get something from this. And these are not mentally healthy people. These aren't mentally healthy people. Now, we're not suggesting, though, John, that every family who has a child who decides that they're born in the wrong body has mental health issues, because things have changed over these last 10 years because of all of the media hype, all of the educational stuff. So you can have a healthy family, a relatively healthy family, that the child has ended up being so indoctrinated through the school system and the school program that their minds are so confused that they're the ones who then begin to exhibit all of the signs of mental health because they're being traumatized in the classroom.
Right. And also, we're going to add one other thing that is of concern, though it's probably in the minority, but we all need to, since we're here to protect women and children, that's really the name of the game here as far as the focus. You can potentially have a situation where there's incest going on in the home.
Oh, yeah.
And this covers for it, because now we're going to focus on superficial stuff when in fact the child is actively being perped on, now being turned into the opposite sex. Perpetrators love that because now we can focus on something else. And lo and behold, nobody will ask any questions. We've got some very serious red flags right in front of our face. This child, the perp, and unfortunately all too well, you've written a book about your own situation where these perps, here's a guy that is into cross-dressing. Why? He's into pornography, but it could be perping on the child. The child is trying to get attention to say, help me. So what's the child possibly do? Dress in sister's underwear, dress in mom's underwear. And unless we're mindful enough that this could be an indicator of serious ongoing sexual perpetration, we say, oh, the kid's dressing in women's underwear. He must be trans.
Well, it's so crazy making for anyone that really wants to help the child too, because it's really hard to dig down to figure out what's really going on. And because we're not allowed to do that in Canada, it makes it very hard. But I know that there are some therapists that really want to help the child and will try to, stay away from the trans stuff and let's talk about, what's really going on for you. And those are the things we need to still talk about, and we need to have our hands untied. Interestingly enough, I do have something that the International Foundation for Therapeutic Counseling Choice. So this is an international organization that I'm involved with, and they have some treatment guidelines. I did that again, that I'm going to put up for you because I think this might help for parents. Where is the treatment guidelines? So these are the guidelines that they're suggesting for approaches for treating young people or teens, or even those who have actually transitioned for many, many years that decide, just a minute, I'm not comfortable with my decision. I think I really messed up. But we believe that there's a right to align one's feelings and behaviors to biological sex, that everyone should have the right to do that if they want to do that, and especially in order to live according to values and beliefs that bring them true happiness. That's a human right. And then number two is that mental health interventions pose none of the medical risks of gender transition affirming medical and surgical intervention. If we can treat the mental health of these children, they're not at risk of all of the other long-term risks of medicalization and mutilation. We just really want to see parents and young people get the help they need. And then we believe that skilled, thorough, and ongoing mental health evaluation and support are needed by both the gender dysphoric minor and their families, just like you said, John. And for 30 years, Dr. Ken Zucker out of Toronto treated gender identity disordered children and their families. Because he saw exactly what you said, and Brad, you nailed it with that question. What he experienced was that there was a whole family dynamic here that needed. It wasn't the child is kind of put on the altar as the one with the problem, but what he readily found was the family was having problems. And there were some things like we talked about, mental health issues with mom or dad, and perhaps incest, any of those kind of things.
That's where you allow a therapist to go deeper and those things start to come out, right, Dr. Ann?
Absolutely. And then, so he had such great success, but, he said things like, that are just so scandalous. He just told the parents, put the Barbies away, when they were letting their little boy, 4-year-old boy play with the Barbies. And
sure.
He just put some boundaries in that were normative biological boundaries. And that really, it was about what the mom was doing often. Dads were kind of maybe more passive, and mom was doing the kind of almost transitioning the child, so he dealt with all of it. So
and I do want to mention,
yep.
Zucker and Blanchard, they're part of the DSM working group. They're very key individuals. They did good work, but the trouble that I have, the issue that I have with them, again, they're
right.
published, they have noteworthy perspectives. But what I say is this: given now how many years this ruse has been going on, the damage has been created, the carnage left behind,
yep.
At some point in time, just like those 75,000 professionals, don't you, as a professional, if you got it wrong, especially if you've been in a key position to influence the ability to bill for these surgeries, okay, without the DSM, you have no billing available. So Blanchard and Zucker, the question is this: why haven't you stepped forward, called a news conference and say, you know what, we recant, we repent, we were wrong. We are we want to revert back to the diagnosis of the DSM-4, gender identity disorder. It was absolutely fine.
Yes.
Why aren't they stepping forward? It's not enough for them to say, well, we want things to slow down. Forget slowing down. The train's going over the cliff. Kids are being harmed. Kids are being sterilized and amputated. So where are Zucker and Blanchard, who facilitated this ruse, this diabolical scheme? Now, maybe they had best of intentions, but guess what? Their work in the DSM-5 allowed for all this because it made it profitable, made it to be able to be built. So 12 people plus one created all this.
Yeah, I can give you a trillion reasons
step
why.
Forward and say enough is enough. We got it wrong. We're calling for everything to go back to, with this diagnosis, go back to the DSM-4.
That was actually helping. And that's the thing, because Zucker had it right. And then he got pressured. Big pharma, and all of the whole ideological junk. And he got pressured and he caved. Now, maybe he didn't cave totally because he's published some other stuff, but it's kind of been under, you're like that too. Not what you're saying is right. It's been under, so it would just kind of go through and not create a lot of havoc. But instead of calling it out and saying, this is wrong, we were wrong, we should never have done this. But you see, there's a huge cost to that now, because look at all of these adults who have transitioned. Right. It's going to be like a tornado come through, man, because there's going to be such big lawsuits.
Right. But people need to understand the DSM-5 published in 2013. If it weren't for that volume, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this today.
No, because it wouldn't.
Simple as that. So Blanchard and Zucker have the obligation, an ethical responsibility to do the right thing, step up and say, we got it wrong. We made a massive mistake. We repent. We recant. Let's go back to the diagnosis that was working. And you and I have been therapists for years. We've worked with troubled kids, traumatized kids. There was nothing wrong prior to the changing of that in 2013, and all hell broke loose. They opened the floodgates. So those 12 plus one, I call them the dirty dozen plus one. Stand up and say you got it wrong so that all the billing can be stopped and this whole thing can be put to an end so that kids can actually get help instead of sterilized and amputation of body parts.
Yeah, you can do that right here on our show too, guys. You're more than welcome to come right here.
Come on. Absolutely. We would welcome them.
100%.
Yeah, I'm not just sure how and what that would look like, but I think where there needs to be dialogue and there needs to be accountability. And, because we've been all thrown under the bus over and over and over
100%.
For not caving. And, I think that we're not going to cave now. We're going to stand up for these kids.
You're a conspiracy theorist.
Oh, I know. I have family members that don't even want to talk to me because of all this. But you know what? Kids are too important.
So do I. Have the same thing happening in my life, and I'm just a broadcaster. But because we talk about this on a regular basis, it's hard not to get involved, right? It's hard not to get involved and give people the knowledge and the experience that they need to help them hopefully make a better choice going forward rather than the deviant one that they've been forced into. There's been a lot of great things that have come from tonight. John, I think we should bring it back around to Dr. Ann's book before we wrap up the program tonight. Where can we find it? How much is it? All that kind of stuff.
That's right. Ann talked to us about that. And as a matter of fact, do you want to review the contents or the chapters? Give people sort of a sense of what they will, if they're going to purchase the book, what are they going to read? And then where can they get a hold of it? I do know it's on Amazon for sure.
Absolutely. Now I just have to find the table of contents. Okay, where is it? Oh, dear. So I talk about mental step in the dark, which is going backwards, right? What we actually did. But then truth that transforms, because I wanted to talk about that to begin with. We have to start with truth, because if we don't start with what is actually true and honest, then it's just a mess. Then I talk about radical gender theory, because parents need to understand this whole theory that has created such havoc with our children and in the education system, hijacking the language. So I talk a little bit about that. I mean, our language, English language, has been hijacked in so many levels. But radical queer theory has really done a number. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a big thing now in the workplace, in education. Everyone has to learn it, and it is a mess. It's another.
But Alvin Louie, we've had him on. He addresses that in a great way.
I think we should reshuffle those letters a bit. Maybe D-I-E.
Yeah,
just thinking.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, that's it. Put them in the other way. Then I talk about the actual gender identity disorder and the era of the politicized child. Like we're just using children as pawns. Stages of affirming care, criminalizing psychotherapy and pastoral care through Bill C-4. So I do talk about that in this book. And then desistance, detransitioning, and re-identifying. Because what we're seeing more and more, and John, you're seeing this too, is that so many young people are going, I've had enough of this hasn't helped, I'm detransitioning. And it's so hard for them. It's so hard for them on so many levels because doctors don't want to help them. They don't want to help them. There's all kinds of help to become trans, but to detransition. And then long short of gender affirming care, and I put some parental helps in the back. So things to think about.
Every pastor should have a copy of that. So those of you that attend churches, that are on boards of leadership in churches or synagogues, mosques, everybody needs to get a hold of a copy of your book and please inform the congregation of Anne's book and the resources then that are available in that book.
Thanks, John. My heart is really to get the word out because unfortunately, the church by and large has also failed our families because they've been afraid. They've been afraid. They didn't understand. Maybe, how do we stand against this? We don't like it. We don't think it's right. But what do we?
There's a lot of people that have been misled along the way, and the church just falls in line with the rest, from the parents right on down. So there's a deviance of all of this, and we are here to expose it, and we're here to save and protect women and children, and that's been our goal from the day one, isn't it, John?
That's right. And Anne, how can people get a hold of that book?
So it's on Amazon. It's probably the easiest way. So just go on Amazon, look for The Ultimate Deception, The Truth of Gender Affirming Care. It'll come right up and you can order online. And I think they're around $20 on Amazon now. So.
And this is what you look for. Let me decrease that. There you go. So that's the cover right there.
Yes.
That's the book you look for, The Ultimate Deception, The Truth of Gender Affirming Care by Dr. Anne Gillies.
Well, thank you guys for having me on again. This is a passionate topic for me, and I'm just really, really happy that we can have it out there and talk about it, and more parents are hearing truth. And I'm excited because now I'm seeing parent groups come together to get their kids out of the school system because they're hearing truth and they don't want their kids indoctrinated anymore. So we're on a roll.
Well, that is good. We need that, don't we, John?
It takes all of us coming together to try to fight this. And Brad, that's why I'm appreciative of you. We're all doing this. We don't get paid. This is a labor of love on all of our parts because we're parents. And even if you're not a parent, you have to understand the value of human life and that it doesn't help when we harm someone and manipulate them.
That's right. That's right.
John, what's coming up next Sunday night? We've got another great show lined up for next Sunday. Who's our special guest?
Well, if it can be worked out, we will have Aaron Cruz, used to be Aaron Holmes, who will unmask the movement to it's really which underlies a lot of human trafficking now, but she's going to connect dots as far as the push to normalize, legalize, destigmatize pedophilia. We see that in a lot of different ways. The myth of MAPS, minor attracted persons, that is being floated out there. But she will help people understand how kids are being made vulnerable and how trafficking is actually happening. So if she is able to be with us, that would be great. And if not, or shortly after that, we're going to look at, and we'll have Anne come back, and we're going to look at what are the red flag indicators of sexual abuse that are being reframed or overlooked as far as the red flag indicators of sexual abuse. So we'll go into that list so parents can be equipped, and others and school officials can be equipped. Really, all mandated reporters should already know this, but what are the 9 red flag key clinical indicators of sexual abuse? We will be covering that soon.
Well, thank you very much to both of you for being here. We want to remind our viewers to like, share, subscribe, join us on YouTube. We have our own website as well at unmaskingthetransmovement.com. And Dr. Ann, your website is available at, one more time?
restoringthemosaic.ca.
Fantastic. Thank you both for being here tonight. John, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
I'm just always grateful to have Dr. Ann Gillies back in the saddle with us.
Well, thank you very much to both of you. Till next time, everybody, thanks for being here. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. Remember, it's not our kids' fight, it's our fight. It's time to get involved. We'll see you next week.